So before we jump into the session, I'd like to introduce today's session host, Haripriya. Thanks for joining and welcome for the session. Haripriya has about 18 years of work experience and expertise in the area of banking. She has worked in variety of companies, including ABN AMRO, JP Morgan, Citibank, and currently she's a vice president of State Street Global Advisors. She has spent quite a bit of time handling variety of functions in the organization, including operations, learning and development, program management, market surveillance. That's an interesting one, Haripriya. I'd like to know more about that. I've heard of market intelligence. Market surveillance looks like a much more broader ambit of things, and business analysis, right? So Haripriya is also an alumni of the Executive MBA in Product Leadership from IPL. She's very passionate about training and loves giving back to the community, which is what you're doing right now, Haripriya. And a very warm welcome to you, and handing over the session to you to introduce the speaker and take this forward. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you, Professor, for articulating my intro so very well. A very happy Friday to all of you, and really appreciate you all taking time out to join this rescheduled session today. A big thank you to our speaker, Mrs. Manila Rauniyar, for accommodating the change amidst her busy schedule. I guess Zoom felt it was well positioned on a Friday than on a Tuesday, so we get some such time to do yoga, I believe. I hope people had some time to take their yoga. Like how Professor mentioned, right? This week of Product Leadership Festival was very exciting, right? Interesting topics and great insights from speakers. Now we're going to continue that journey today with two sessions. The first one being 5 to-dos of product positioning. Now, a couple of you would have attended the session yesterday where speaker Mr. Sonal, he shared some examples, right? It's the same product, the product having the same features, but one was successful, whereas the other failed, right? So today our speaker is going to give us some tips on how to position our product for success. I would say it's just not for product, right? Even from a personal friend, we all want to position ourselves, as best in the lot. Could be for your job, could be for your performance appraisal, or even could be for an executive MBA class. I hope my professor is listening. Thank you. Coming to the theme of the festival, right? Storytelling. It's a beautiful art. Now, if you are given an entire day, we all would love to speak the entire day. But if we have to narrate our story in few lines and few sentences, I believe that is the biggest challenge. And I've been encountering that challenge this week, crunching our speaker's story of her experience and her skills into very few lines. I hope I do some justice here. I'm very, very honored to host Mrs. Manila Rauniyar, a product marketing professional with over 16 years of experience in market and segment management, specializing in B2B technology marketing. Her journey into marketing started with HCL Infosystems, and she grew and ventured deeper into this arena by working with corporates like Bharti Airtel, IBM, and Tata Communications. Her shift from corporate to startup side of product marketing was through Moengage, and is currently the Senior Director of Product Marketing with Clear. Now, Clear is an organization that simplifies finances, saves money and time for millions of Indian business and people. Now, some interesting facts: her eye for detail, unconventional thinking, and result orientation drove her towards success, launching and sustaining go-to-market strategies across new and existing products. And some of this is what she's going to share with us today. Being a tech marketer, right? She expertises in technologies like cloud, networking, and is now keen in learning AI as well. Now, while this was professional, some lesser known facts, which you wouldn't find otherwise, is that she is an avid gardener and she loves the charm of countryside, enjoying these greeneries. She is also a binge watcher and loves bonding with her dog. These were some secrets for you to connect with her. With no further delay, I would hand it over to you, Manila, to take over. Thank you.
Thank you, Priya. Thank you, Priya, for such a lovely introduction. I think that sort of peps me up for the session today. And thank you, Institute of Product Leadership, for having me as well. I think it's a lovely 1 week of how people come together, and how people socialize what's been working, what's not been working, what they think about marketing, and product marketing being something that I am so passionate about. It's been lovely to see other speakers also share something so real to ground, and something that we can actually use in our everyday life and work. That it's I would commend the work and effort that's been put by Institute of Product Leadership for having these festivals and greatly running it for past 3 years. Yeah. So, and I know it's Friday, a full week of work has actually passed. So I'm very certain that a lot of us do not have a huge appetite for heavy gyan. So I promise to really keep it light with my session on 5 to-dos of product positioning. And before I really sort of, start my slides, a quick disclaimer again, when it comes to positioning, when it comes to marketing, what I'm sharing today are just recommendations. Okay, there is nothing right, there is nothing wrong, or rather I'd say there's no one way of doing it. So please pick the ones that you believe would work in your sphere of work, and just refine it, give it your spin. If it is absolutely new that you've discovered, go ahead and patent it and share with us, right? It's all for the good of the community, the product marketing community, I would say. So with that, I think I'll sort of quickly start and share my presentation. Please do let me know when it's up.
We can see a screen, Manila. Maybe you want to put it in the presentation mode. Yeah, perfect.
Yeah, is this up now? Okay, great. So basically, guys, 5 to-dos of product positioning, right? So I really didn't want to sort of, like I said, share frameworks. All of us are mostly experienced in the work that we do. So what I thought would be useful is more around sharing some of the areas of work or lenses that really has worked for me, right? So this may not be a typical session wherein I'll be sharing a model or a format or a framework, but what I'll share is few areas that sort of has worked and hasn't really worked, or when you're talking about certain bases, what are the things that as a product marketer that you should consider, and when you are sort of, collaborating with your stakeholders and peers in the company, what are the things that you should sort of, avoid in terms of pitfall, or be judicious about sort of picking up when you think about product positioning. Okay. So before we head into the 5 to-dos, the fundamentals of product positioning, just to set context and sort of have everybody aligned, right? So I really see product positioning as a critical area of work within our GTM strategy. Now, this stream has the core task of actually bringing out the identity of the product, right? What it is, what does it do, who does it help? Why should one care about how you are positioning it, or why should one feel that this is something that I need, right? The idea of product positioning is really to put forward a product in the most appealing manner to the target audience. And I would say there are multiple bases, but there are 6 that you sort of you truly need to consider. Okay, these are something which is like a basic that you really need to consider and put time and effort on before you sort of go ahead and conclude on your product positioning exercise, right? Now, what are these 6 areas, right? What is the product, right? So what is the product for what it is right now? Okay, and I'll delve deeper into that. What is the target market and what is the cohort, right? So we all operate at the target segment level. We know which market, which region, which geo. We go down to the persona, but there is also a specific cohort which we do need to consider when we talk about positioning, right? Then what is the pain point that it solves, right? So what exactly are we solving for? What is the need, or what is the pain point? How does it solve, right? So there are multiple products in the market that would be solving for the pain point that you're also targeting, right? So what is your value proposition? Where does it differentiate, the USP? And how do we get it out, the actual messaging, right? In terms of what are those concise statement pointers which considers what the company is, what it is doing, who is it serving, and what should be then your positioning statement, right? Now, in my following slides, My intent is to share, like I said, the to-dos that at least I believe one should consider across these bases. So I'll move on, and Priya, help me sort of. I know you've been in the industry much longer than I have, and I'm sure you would have great input. So just sort of add it and enrich it as and when you feel right.
Perfect. Thank you, Manila. We'll do that.
Sure. So first one, positioning by cohort, right? Now, when it comes to positioning strategy, a single cohort strategy really tends to be a disservice to the product. And a lot of times you would see that, when a product gets released, be it software, be it a B2C product, uh, a blanket positioning may just limit the resonance of the proposition. So how do we go about building the cohorts, right? And there are multiple frameworks, like I said. The simplest that I would like you to consider is first around understanding the diversity of the segment. Now, if you look at the right-hand side of the chart, you would see certain cohort identifiers listed, right, in the chart on the right-hand side. Now, you could sort of understand the diversity of the segment, and it would start from as basic as being the age and gender to something which is as deep as a trigger, a preference, or an affinity, right? It could be it could be the authority, it could be the usage, it could be culture, it could be mix of it. So what do we need to do once we understand the diversity of the segment? We got to list down. Okay, so let's then list down the cohort identifiers that are relevant for your product, then correlate them to identify the attributes. Now, this is important, right? So there, it could be a mix of 2 and 3 and 4 identifiers which come together, which then gives you a set of audience which have a common attribute or characteristics. Now, when you do that, that is the grouping of the target cohorts that you would arrive at. The last thing that we do need to do once we arrive at it is if there is an overlap, right? A simple sense check in terms of what is the relevance of the product for each cohort. And if there are distinct cohorts that you've arrived at, I think that's where you should sort of stick to it and say, these are the different cohorts, that we have. Now, this may look at something which is very hygiene, but let me sort of give an example to you and, help you understand this better, okay? A very simple example that you would have is of the Rubik's Cube, okay? Now, traditionally, we see Rubik cubes as being positioned as a very intricate puzzle, okay, which is sort of bracketed for kids who are of 8 years and above, right? It's positioned as something which helps with correlation, permutation. How do you sort of identify what comes next? How do you foresee it? And there's a whole science involved behind this whole Rubik cube when it is positioned for 8 years and above, okay? Now you see, and you go and search in marketplace, you will now find Rubik's Cube, which is also fit for toddlers. Okay, and I have a 5-year-old. So I always thought that, what will she do with a Rubik Cube? But it is now positioned for as young as 3 years. And the positioning of the same product is now to support sensory and fine motor skills, right? So when your kid is growing up, 1 year, 2 year, they need gripping in the finger, and there are multiple ways you develop that sensory and fine motor skills, right? And Rubik Cube is one now which is getting positioned to support that function in toddlers, right? Now, there's another very niche positioning for Rubik Cube, okay? That is it actually being an aid for children who have a medical condition like autism, where a Rubik Cube can actually provide soothing tactile sensations, which sort of eases down the anxiety that you would otherwise see in, children with this condition, right? Now, imagine one single Rubik Cube or one product, 3 different cohorts and 3 different positioning, right? And this is why I sort of insist that, when we go about setting our cohorts, understand the diversity of the segment, and then identify your cohort identifiers, list them down, do the combination of different identifiers, sense check if you've arrived at a certain attribute or characteristic, and then go about, taking your positioning forward.
Manila, this is wonderful, right? Sorry to pause you here. Meaning it's the same product, but it can address different personas, right? So, tying it back to day one session by Mr. Renga, wherein he addressed that marketing starts with understanding the audience first and then follows the entire product life cycle. So, same product, you have position in context to their problems, right? So, I'm tying it back to some of the learnings, a problem solution fit. I would say it's awesome. This example is really awesome. Thanks, Manila.
Yeah, absolutely. And you would see that, the value proposition of each of these, for each of these cohort is very different, and it is getting served by the same product. So that is where we sort of, need to make sure that, we've covered all areas when it comes to identifying our cohort. Now the second one is around avoiding the two pitfalls when in search of USP. Okay. Now, unique selling proposition, differentiation. This is where a large part of product marketing work or product marketing stress is around. Okay. Honestly, I have sort of fallen in this pit a few times. So when a product really comes out, you how do we really start, right? There's a laundry list of features and capabilities. So our natural instinct as a PMM is to start digging with this list, right? Now, there are two areas where a product marketer can get lost, okay? And that's what I've sort of listed down on the left-hand side. Now, the first one is that we take a lens of how our own product has matured. Okay, so remember, in at least the technology companies, we've got MVP 1, we've got MVP 2, we've got product 2.0, and honestly, for speaking my heart out, these are traps. Okay, so even for a brand new product, we try and benchmark it with competition. Now, what does it do is it sort of makes us start at a very tricky place, if not completely wrong. Okay. Why do I say that? Because one, it leads you to focus on features that may be new to us. So when you start digging on, the feature and other list, and if it is an MVP2 product or product 2.0, you would start sort of understanding and analyzing what's new from what you've already been talking about, right? And perhaps that is where I see a problem, or that is where the trap is, right? Because once we focus on features that may be new to us, it may not really be a USP. So what do we do? We end up putting a lot of effort to prove an average capability to be a USP. Now we'll do a lot of effort, and then we've come out with our proposition, we've come out with a positioning, but eventually it will not yield, because when the actual pitches go live, it will not resonate, right? And I'm very sure that a lot of us have been there, and we can relate to it. It's actually more serious than a heartbreak, I would say, because a lot of effort that we've actually put goes down the drain, right? Now, a way to come out of this trap is a genuine SWOT. Okay. Now, SWOT analysis have been something that's been there for ages. Okay. So what's new about this? So what I sort of recommend is that you do the SWOT analysis and then correlate it with the features. So what do? You basically draw your SWOT and then superimpose the capabilities that you have, right? And these are capabilities which are not just new, but the entire full capabilities that you believe are, cutting edge, that you believe have, which are more helpful to the audience or cohort that you've developed, sort of superimpose them. Now check if you have any capability or feature that enables you to make either the opportunity more feasible or adds to your strength, increasing your right to win, right? Now, that ideally is the USP, regardless of it being new or it being old. Identify them and stick to them. And the reason I would say that you should do this, and I've seen in large enterprises, that's what tends to become, really the practice that PMM follow, wherein when you're really convincing the management of why this should be the positioning or why this should be the USP that should lead the positioning, you really have a solid working in the backdrop to say that this is how the strengths get amplified, or this is where it helps us, get the opportunity or tap the opportunity better. So that is one way, or that's sort of for me a proven way to sort of come out or build on the USP that we're looking for.
Manila, is this specific to you, this SWOT? I mean, your practice, or it's kind of followed through the industry?
Like you said, Priya. So basically, SWOT is an age-old practice. Okay, you would see even in marketing schools that we do insist about learning the formulation of SWOT or learning how to go about SWOT, right? But superimposing the capabilities on the SWOT, like I said in the first place, there is nothing right. There's no wrong or right, and you could have your own spin. This is perhaps my spin on SWOT. Okay, so this has actually helped me sort of, like I said, be convinced about what the USP is, right? Which is a strong play when you say that this is what is going to amplify your strength, and this is the feature. Then you ideally sort of lead with that feature, right? And it's a lot of thinking backed, approach. So SWOT is not new, but the spin on SWOT with superimposing of product capabilities, I think that's something I would take credit for.
Yeah, very unique, Manila. Thanks for sharing that.
Absolutely. The other pitfall that I would like to sort of call around is about, focusing on the core competencies alone. Okay. So, and very naturally, right? So, product has come out. There's a core purpose of this product, and that's what we're supposed to sell, right? But really, if we look at a lot of cases, if that was the case, and if we were supposed to limit our USP to just core competencies, why would mobile phones be sold on specs of camera, right? I mean, the core competency of the mobile phone is to telecommunicate, right? So how many times have you really gone and asked, does the phone have the ability to receive and transmit signal in low coverage areas, right? We're okay shouting on top of our voices while in metro when the call doesn't connect or it drops. But when the camera does not work, we all make, ends meet to make sure that either we get it replaced or we buy one, which is not the core capability of a phone, right? So for all, the core capability, which would eventually become your unique selling proposition, may be sitting outside the laundry list of features. Okay, so as a PMM, we should be judicious in terms of identifying what the USP is, and not just looking at core competency to really identify that USP. So I think that example hopefully helped. I'll move to the next one, which is my third to do, which is around saying that you should not just limit with serving the pain. And this point is more around value proposition. Okay, now value proposition actually is a key contributor to how we position. Rather, they're very closely knit with it's actually a segue into the positioning, right? So without a strong value proposition, no amount of work can really lead to arriving at the right positioning. So how do we really define the value proposition? Now, in a very simplistic word, value proposition is actually a promise that a product makes to the consumer, right? So, and it's typically an equation of pain reliever, gain generator, right? So what is your pain? I'm sort of serving it. And what do you gain by using my product? We map the need. We map the need, the pain to accomplish the need, and how do we solve it? So that's generally the format that we use, right? That what is the need? Does my product solve it? And how do we solve it? That sort of becomes the value proposition. Now, this one is sort of my personal learning, and it may seem a little bit more applicable to the B2B side of the world, especially in technology offering, because that's perhaps where I have spent majority of my time in. So we do tend to sort of establish the value proposition on only remediating current issues or pain points, right? Now, this is exactly where it always falls in the trap of being compared apples to apples with the competition product, right? It may sort of end up getting into a feature to feature comparison and eventually a price war, because what we try and do is we position the product in such a way that today you have an issue, I'll solve that issue. Somebody else will also come and say, I'll solve that issue. You'll say, I have 10 features. Somebody else will say, I have 10 features. And then eventually it gets into the price war. Now, I would recommend that we sort of not limit with serving the pain. Because if we build a value proposition that serves the customer's current here and now need, which is the pain, or which is the need of the hour, plus making him prepared for an imminent future need. Okay, so it's not just serving here and now, but also saying that this product or this offering also sort of prepares you, right, for something that you will need in near future, which will eventually give your business an edge or advantage. Perhaps that is where the value proposition becomes more powerful, right? Now, this also eventually gives the boost that your product needs in terms of positioning, because what it does is that it naturally elevates the status of the product or the offering, right? And this is perhaps where you would also end up, identifying your USP against just features that the competition is offering, right? So I think this is critical. I think this will help at least the PMM, the product managers. A lot of us should evaluate that we build something which doesn't solve for here and now, which sort of elevates the status of the product, right?
Oh, Manila, this helps me connect to some of our projects that we are doing. And one very fascinating thing, right? Your organization clears recent ad on filing income tax returns. I just got my Form 16, Manila, and I'm a person who keeps it until the last minute, right, to file tax, and I keep hoping for some extensions, right? The ad, like when you're talking about gain creators, right? It not only says it solves my pain of filing tax, it says it can be done in 3 minutes. It says there is no data entry. I'm really pulled into that, right? Also, also when I was typing Manila, just saying return filing, right? I saw that clear tax features first on the list. And this is one of our speaker, Mr. Abhinav. He kind of touched on what do we do on digital marketing, like say your search engines or analytics or taking feedback that helps organization come on the top of the list, right? So we could tie it back, and this is awesome, great value proposition what Clear has done, and I think you've done in a timely manner, like correct filing time. It's a submi in Manila.
Absolutely, absolutely. And this is a B2C team whose ad you've seen, and they've been awesomely creative. So I will completely pass my, convey your
Absolutely.
likeness to that team. Yeah, for sure.
Thanks.
Great. Then I'll sort of move to the fourth one, and a very critical one, right, which is around messaging, right? And how do we get the balance right when it comes to messaging? Now, getting the balance right anywhere is very critical, right? So so it is with the positioning statement. Now, like we said, a value proposition was a promise of the product that we make to the consumer. I would say a positioning statement actually is like a promise which a provider actually makes to its customer, right? Which is sort of very strong in terms of what we will deliver as a service provider and why you should believe me, right? Which is sort of supported by proof points. So few things that we obviously need to do in terms of getting the balance right. One, that it should be true to its core, not too overboard, that it sort of doesn't resonate, and not too ordinary as well, right? That it sort of doesn't sticks. Now, this actually has been an area of constant learning, unlearning, and relearning for me, because there are sort of no set rules other than being concise and sharp and true. Okay. So what I do really is I more or less follow this messaging house. Now, this is also a industry available messaging house. I sort of created and did few tweaks to sort of make it easy for me to sort of arrive at the end result. And I sort of run this messaging house perhaps with an example for you. So the example that I've really taken is of Martech. Okay. MarTechs are basically marketing technology organization. The example right now is of a MarTech that offers technology stack, which specializes in cross-channel campaigns. Okay. Now I'll sort of allow you few minutes to read through this, grasp this, and then I'll give you my version of how I use this, how I would, typically use this to arrive at a positioning statement. Now, again, this is technology. It's for sort of a new age MarTech company. So you'd find, the positioning statement sort of coming out to be typically for a B2B segment or site, right? Great. So I think you did get time to go through the messaging house. Now, you'd see there are different layers in the messaging house. Where do we start in terms of who we are, right? So who is this organization and how do you want to position that organization? What is your promise, right? In terms of what are you saying that you will help enable or you help deliver? Who are you promising it to? This is where your persona level activities, your persona level analysis sort of comes into play, right? Or if you've got a specific cohort that you've built would come in play here. To accomplish what is the mission of that cohort that you're trying to sort of make him accomplish or help him get, right, or receive? How do you position yourself as the one that you would deliver, right? And what are the key impact areas? And if there are proof points that you would like to support, right? So if I go by this messaging house, for the MarTech company, the positioning statement that I've sort of arrived at is that now we are a specialized marketing technology provider that enables cross-channel campaigns for startups, helping them accelerate demand by 50% through an AI-powered intelligent lead scoring engine that is trusted by 100 plus global enterprises, right? Now, this becomes my sort of opening statement to support the positioning of the product, right? This is where and basically this messaging is what will go into a lot of your briefs that you would eventually give to the a marketing person, that you would eventually give to the content person, who would then sort of decipher it into different creatives, different taglines, different punchlines, right? So as a procedure to all that activity, when you build your positioning statement, perhaps this is a messaging house that can be used, which sort of encompasses how you position your company, how do you position what you're delivering, how do you make sure that your USP comes into play, which cohort you're targeting very sharp and concisely, and how do you make the audience sort of believe that you have a proof point to justify and you have evidence to sort of justify that you're the best one to deliver this, right? So this is my fourth pointer on, on the to-dos of product positioning. I have the last one and perhaps the closest to
Manila, sorry, I'll pause you there. That was really awesome, right? The messaging. Now, one question is, while you had given that sentence, it was nice. Does this messaging suit for B2B or B2C kind of segments?
Yeah,
This.
I think that's a great question, Priya. So basically, see, the logic behind arriving at a positioning would more or less be same, right? So can this messaging house be used for B2B or B2C? I would say yes. But having said that, I've been into the B2B space all my career, right? So this has been something that's come to me very handy in my B2B space. But if you perhaps go and look at B2C messaging houses, there may be few other, areas of personalization or triggers that you may consider, right? I had seen an ad which said "Mera wala hara." Okay,
Yeah.
color paint ad which said "Mera wala hara." Now that "Mera wala hara" is something that you can't really perhaps do it in a B2B, but that may have great space in B2C, right? So your messaging sort of would have some more pointers perhaps for B2C, but it's a good place to start even with this one, is what I'd say.
Okay, perfect. Perfect. Thanks. Thanks for that.
Great. So and like I said, I'll be crisp. So I've arrived at my last slide, okay, which is, I think, if we have product managers in the community, if you've got product managers who are sort of listening, they may sort of, feel it. But as a PMM, the last one in my list really is, breaking the bias, okay. And there's no framework that I'm going to share here, but what I'd like to share is that, as product marketers, we really sit at the conjuncture of sales, product, and customers, right? So we really need it is our responsibility as PMM to keep things real, okay? And we ought to do that to eventually make the product successful, or how the positioning of the product, or how the product is being seen or valued in the market successful, right? So understand what I'd say is that understand the product, its features and capabilities for what it is now, okay? Because that is how the customers will see it in its current form. And a lot of startups, a lot of companies, especially on the technology side, we've got great roadmaps, right? And when you speak to your product managers, in their definition, the product is seen not just as here and now, but also as how they're foreseeing or envisioning the product in future, right? Which may take some time to really come alive, right? And we all know that no product is ever released ideal. So, and having said that, hats off to all the product managers, right? With the amount of sweat and hard work that goes in, it's only fair for these product managers to have a strong sense of belonging or be biased, right? But as a product marketer, we ought to play the devil's advocate. We ought to keep things real. We ought to dissect the offering for what it is. We ought to dissect the product for what it is right now, and how will it solve the customer's pain point or aspirations in its current form, right? And this is the trickiest part, as we may be the ones standing against a whole bunch of really senior folks with great visions, right? But like I said, it is required for us to take this step, break the bias, hear the product manager, keep keep your own assessment in front, and then arrive at the actual definition and positioning of the product. Because if you don't do that, it will not help you solidify the value proposition, which is extremely important as an input to the product positioning, right? I'd like to sort of sum it up with an example. We don't know, right? So in the process of sort of debating, arguing, playing the devil's advocate, trying to get an unbiased view, we may just end up uncovering a new segment or a new capability altogether, right? That resonates much higher with a specific industry or persona. A perfect example to really conclude this is how we know one of the most useful stationaries of today, which is Post-it, was really discovered, right? It was an outcome of a failed product. It was not the actual product that was actually which was actually being or trying to be brought to life by 3M. So there are wins even in being the devil's advocate. And as a product marketer, I think the last thing that we do need to do is break the bias. Okay, break the bias which comes from the product owners, the company, the strategy teams, in terms of really chalking out what the product can do right now, and also funneling back these insights back to them, right? Saying that this is what we further need in terms of enhancements in the product, which will then position it as a stronger and a differentiated offering or product, right? So I think I pretty much had that as my 5 to-dos. I hope I was able to sort of support them with enough examples, and I didn't bore you with frameworks and models, really.
Manila, absolutely no. It was so simple, so easily, we were able to correlate. So bang on. I think the bias part, right? It applies everywhere, right? Product or, other leadership aspects everywhere, you kind of go ahead and see the bias. Manila, what we would do right now is we will probably take some questions from audience. So there are a few questions coming up, and team, please feel free to use the Q&A to post your questions. So I'll read out some of them, and then probably you can help answer that. One question is positioning an internal exercise by the team that helps create messaging? That's one question that has come up.
Correct. I think that's the way to look at it. See, so positioning, obviously, we don't go out in the market saying this is my positioning, right? We try to bring out the positioning that we brought in terms of identifying, like I said, even if we take the 6 bases that we spoke about, sort of putting that together and coming out as as the positioning statement. It is an internal exercise. It is an internal sort of a playbook that we create then for your brand marketing teams, field marketing teams, performance marketing teams, to then convert it into a lot of creatives, a lot of taglines. How do you want to sort of then take it out in the market? So at least for me, that's how I've been using it. It is an internal exercise. Your positioning statement eventually then gets consumed by different stakeholders.
Thank you, Manila. I'll read one question from Jayashree. Does point 4 translate to a POE of the product, right? If not, are there any pointers or best practices to create a POV?
When you say 4, I think we were talking about messaging.
Messaging,
right?
Yeah.
Now, see, messaging. So I would slightly differentiate POV and messaging. And like I said, there's no right or wrong way of doing it. So a point of view is generally a very unique lens that a company tries to give to a scenario, a situation, a pain point, or a proposition, right? So there is a link between how you would message it, but POV is a much larger exercise as well, wherein you would come out with an opinion which is unique to you or your company, right? Wherein you would say that this is a lens, this is an angle by which you should see a situation. So and your messaging in some form has to encapsulate that POV. But I think POV is it goes hand in glove, but I wouldn't say that it is the same point or exercise.
Thank you. One more question that has come is, can you recommend any tools to do a psychographic based segmentation?
Psychographic based segmentation from a tool perspective. So honestly, a lot of our segmentations, I don't go by the outputs of tool, because at any given point of time, a tool have limitation. So would I recommend and call out one tool? Perhaps not. But what I do want to recommend is that, the outcomes of the tool are perhaps at a 40% level. Okay. What you do need to do to arrive at, your segmentation is much higher in terms of then creating those correlations and permutations, and arriving at cohort, either cohort or even a specific group that you're trying to identify, or a cluster you're trying to identify, maybe for an ABM, is an exercise that you need to build in terms of what has been working and what has not been working in your organization, right? Some of your deal dissections can actually help you elevate there. So, like I said, I wouldn't really call out one tool, wouldn't really sort of recommend or give you a name here, but just a piece of advice that, the outcome of a tool is just 40% there. Yeah.
So Manila, just a little add on to that itself. How about social media channels? Your ad platforms, right? So on that.
Social media channels are so how do you treat social media, right? So where do we use social media? Largely for affiliate marketing, largely for thought leadership, largely for a lot of digital marketing, right? Now, if I consider platforms wherein we all are professionally sort of connected, it's a great place to get yourself discovered or get your product sort of discovered, right? It's a great place to also sort of capture insights if you're doing a lot of social listening, in those forums, right? But does this has the capability to sort of pinpoint and do that entire stretch of work for you? I'll go back to my point. At least it's not worked for me, Priya. So we've spent a lot of money on these mediums, both in terms of understanding, identifying insights, to also trying to reach out to our audiences, right? What we have realized is that it helps you in a buyer journey. It helps you get discovered. But it is, at least in my cases, it has failed to move the needle beyond being discovered to being considered and being, purchased.
Understand. Yeah.
And again, that would be perhaps a B2B sentiment that I'm sharing, and it may be completely different for B2C.
Yeah. One last question, Manila, in the interest of time is, how are emotional aspects taken care with product positioning?
That's a very good question, actually, Priya. I think both in a B2B and B2C setup, it's important to, consider the EQ of the cohort. Does the product solve any emotional aspect? And perhaps I'll re-bring my example of Mera Wala Hara, because you would see that in a B2C setup, that's an emotional aspect, right? So there's green,
Absolutely.
but there's a certain green that is appealing to a certain cohort, right? And that is, the buying decision is just based on the person's choice or affinity to that color, right? But in a B2B setup, while you do need to touch on the aspirations of that persona, aspirations of that role, that person is still taking a decision on behalf of a company, right? So he needs to be a little more judicious, and his buying decision may not be as impulsive as what we would see in B2C, or it may not be a habitual buying behavior that we would consider in an FMCG scenario, right? That you've been used to a paste, so you'll continue using that paste regardless of, how many other options you have, right? So it is important that in both B2B and B2C, you touch upon the emotional quotient, but in perhaps a B2C setup, it's much higher compared to a B2B decision making.
Yeah, makes sense. Now, thank you. I think in the interest of time, and we have the next session, Manila, this was an awesome session, right? Providing with some, really great insights on product positioning. I'm sure many of us are really going to benefit these learnings while we are in the journey of taking our ideas to building product. And I will also just say success of any session lies in participation. And thanks to all audience today for their enthusiasm shown in understanding this topic, much better. Thank you so much. With that, Professor, I hand it back to you.
Thank you. I suppose the best question should go to Priya, right? I'm just kidding. So Manila, do you have any particular picks that you believe had the question that we could give the Digital Learning Award to?
Yeah, I think the POV and messaging question at least tells me that the audience was listening and was able to sort of arrive at a very concrete thinking around how does POV differ from a messaging. So I would love to at least.
So I think Jayashree, congratulations. You will receive the information on how to get that digital learning. And Manila, thank you so much for taking time. And that was very lucid, clear, step prescriptive with great examples. Please accept a small token of appreciation from the Institute of Product Leadership. You will receive this digital certificate, which is automatically verifiable on blockchain. And thank you for your time.